Y'all, Black Friday is coming, and I know you want to make some extra money before the year ends. I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. Inside the club, I am teaching my Black Friday course, a special training just for you, including a group coaching call. So you need to get in the club, do it right now so that you are ready to get this money on Black Friday. Go to hello7.co/club to get all the details and join us. I'm ready. And I frankly feel like we could use all this. This is going to be like we chilling and y'all get to listen in.
Okay, y'all. So we are not in our usual studio setting. Today we are in front of a live audience, and I'm talking to my friend Kendra Adachi, the author of The Lazy Genius Way and also The Lazy Genius Kitchen.
That's right.
Both New York Times bestsellers, so put some respect on it. So I want to start with just a small little story about some small thing that happened to you related to like a storm in a ship.
You guys. So my last book, The Lazy Genius Kitchen, it was supposed to come out March 22nd of 2022, the year we are in now. And about 6 weeks before that book was supposed to come out, which you all have launched something. If you have a business, you're like constantly launching things, and you know the energy required to launch things. It's different than your regular day-to-day, right? So I'm in it. I'm like thick in it. I get a call from my agent, and she says, well, fun news. The boat that is carrying all 30,000 copies of your book was in a storm. And we think your books might be in the bottom of the ocean. That is the correct response, you guys. Yes.
Wow.
I was like, what does one do to respond to news like that? And yeah, it was an interesting thing because even when you have everything lined up, you have all of your plans in a row, you're feeling great energy, you're leaning into your gifts and what matters to you and all these things, there are some times where something can happen that can derail that. And so it was an excellent exercise, at least eventually, once I sort of got over the craziness of my books might be in the ocean. It was a really lovely experience to see and affirm what mattered to me and my team and my business and being like, okay, we got to lean on what we've chosen matters here. Let's make this happen.
Yes. And so what was what happened? Did the book came out later?
The book came out later. So we decided that we had to, I'm trying to think of how much I want to share since this is going to be public. Basically, there was a lack of decision making that I wish had been made. And so I had to say, okay, at what point are we too far gone, right? Yes. How long can we wait to see if the books are indeed drowned before we have to make a different decision? And so we ended up changing the release date from March 22nd to May 3rd, which was the latest I wanted to go and the earliest my publisher was willing to go. So I was like, well, I guess that's what we're choosing.
You had to fight for that.
We had to fight for that. And but I was also really grateful that my publisher trusted me. I think that's one thing, I had success with The Lazy Genius Way. That was launched literally during the pandemic. It was August 2020. So not a great time to try to sell anything. And but it did well. It continued to do well. And so I do think that my trust and my own skill set in my audience and readers and all of that, it did give me the credibility with the people who were making the decision to say, okay, we trust you. We're going to try to make this happen. So we moved it to May 3rd. They got a secondary publisher to try to get some printed really fast in case all the books were in the ocean and all the things. And there are 3 words that are a huge part of my team's culture. I think it's really, really important anytime you're running any sort of business that you have these markers, right? These values in your business that help direct you every day, but especially when things go crazy town.
Yes.
So 3 of the words that are really important to our team are nimble. We're going to be nimble. We always want to be nimble. Creative. That we're not just doing things the way that everyone else does them just because what works for someone else might not work for you. Yes. You don't need to reinvent the wheel if it doesn't matter to you, but you also don't have to be stuck doing exactly what everybody else is doing for their business, right? And then the third one was we protect the vibe. We really seek to not be cynical. Can I tell you how hard it is to not be cynical when your books are at the bottom of the sea? Very hard.
Yes.
So those three things especially, because they were already part of our marrow,
Yep.
it helped us tremendously. We really did not flounder.
Yes.
Because we knew what we needed to do. It's like, well, we're built for this.
Yes,
We
we're
are built to
nimble,
do this.
we're creative.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so we moved the, obviously the publishing date moved to May 3rd, and I came up with this idea to do a pub crawl where we crawled from one publication date to the next publication date. And we had different events between those 2 dates because what we ended up doing, because here's what matters to me, and that's the whole foundation of the Lazy Genius Way, is what matters to you.
Right.
One of the things that matters to me personally, I don't like to work a lot in the summer. I don't want to do it.
Same.
I want to go to
recess.
I want to go to the pool. I want to hang out with my kids. My husband is a school counselor, so he gets a lot of the summers off. It's a really beautiful time for us to be together as a family, and I did not want to be selling a book in the summer. And so I decided, all right, well, if we move this to May 3rd, in the ways that books are normally released into the world, I need to give another at least 4, if not 6 weeks after that
Correct.
publication date.
Because my publication date was May 4th, 2021. So
You just got to keep going.
deep in it in June.
It's no fun, man. It's no fun. And so I decided, all right, what matters to me is that I end this work as soon as possible. As soon as possible. So what the pub crawl did is it turned the beginning, May 3rd, into the end.
Yes.
We ended with this great launch party in town, and we had a couple hundred people come, and it was so fun. But we had been building up to it. So once we got to the launch party, it was like, the book is in the world, and I'm done.
Bye.
and it was,
Bye, y'all.
and it was great. So I think, though, I wish that it had not. Well, actually, I don't know if that's true. I was going to say I wish it hadn't happened. But that kind of situation happening confirmed, reinforced these values that we really, really hold as people and as a company. And I don't know that we would have known that otherwise. And it just showed that we could pivot, we could be nimble, we could be creative.
Yes.
We could stay above the fray of the pessimism and the cynicism that was threatening to drag us down.
Yes.
Because it was so hard. Yeah.
That's great. I love this story. And it's also you don't realize how important culture is until you need it. And then you realize I wish I would have already set the stage for the culture that we need right now during this difficult time.
Yes.
Because usually when stuff like that happens, you need your team to trust you, right? And if that trust hasn't been built, and if they don't feel like you live the values that you say you do, so if you are saying one thing in public and your team sees you do something different behind the scenes, then that breaks trust, right? And so having those values, it means that we're all they're accountable to them, but so are you as a leader.
And I think it also it's good to have them in place before, because not only do you want your team to trust you, you want your team to trust themselves in their own decisions. And so they already also had practice in those values. So when we moved in, that's why it was like, you guys, we're ready for this. We're built for this. We've been talking about this in smaller, less dramatic ways up to this point, but we know how to do this. So let's do it. And it was such a rallying cry that, like you said, it already existed. So it was really empowering.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it because you took a challenging moment and found a way to make it a win anyway. And to understand how dramatic this is, when you literally plan book launches 6 months, sometimes 12 months in advance. So you're dropping all of these hints and you have a whole thing choreographed to lead up to this exact moment. And if right before the moment, nothing happens, it's okay, so we got all this momentum rising to a crescendo that doesn't exist now.
Here was the analogy that I felt like it was. It was like I was getting married. I was in my dress. I was ready. And then I'm just waiting to go out there, right? And then the wedding coordinator comes in and is like, hey, what's up? So the groom has been kidnapped and we don't know when he's coming back, if he's coming back. We're not really sure. We're just going to hang out and wait. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? That's really what it felt like. We were very hamstrung for a while because there was nothing had been decided. We were just sort of in this holding pattern.
Let's see if these books make it. Because also, one thing I will say about publishers is that they cheat, okay? They are cheap, and they were like,
She's not wrong.
they just wanted to see if those books were going to appear. They were like, wait, what if we get this investment back? Also, they will talk you, like you will spend all this time crafting these words, and they will talk to you in depth about paper. What kind of paper it is, the shortage on paper, the struggles with paper. There's a paper shortage right now. My publisher has just informed me. And then they want to talk to you about the printing, right? We could use this print. Do you want a French flap? Do you want a this? I know more about paper and printing and bookmaking than I want. I'm like, I'm responsible for what the words say. Like, I need y'all to worry about that. I don't even talk to me about the paper. I don't care. So they were probably poured over the paper and exactly the format of what the book is going to be, and were stressed about paper shortage or whatever, and then that book was gone, and they were like, oh no.
And and I think that all of that is absolutely right. And to know that I was not the only book on that boat. Like there were other books that were on that boat. And those, like, there was one woman who she had a cookbook on the same boat, and her book came out 2 weeks ago. We are in September. Like they just immediately pushed it to September.
Wow.
And I will say that I think that's why the cultural value of our team of not being cynical is really, really helpful, because it was so easy for me to be like, fix my problems.
Yes.
Fix my problems. And instead realizing like, okay, I realize that perhaps the way that this has gone about it's not ideal for anybody. And we're all doing our best.
Yeah.
And I'm going to advocate for myself as best I can. But really trying to have an attitude of like, another value we have is empathy. Mm-hmm. And just to think like, okay, put myself in their shoes, put myself in a publisher's shoes, which is hard to do because mm-hmm. I would run a publishing company pretty differently than I think a lot 100%. Of publishers run theirs. But it's also if you think about it, that is an industry. That's why being an entrepreneur is so great. Publishing is an industry that has been around for a very long time, mm-hmm. and it's enormous. And it's like, trying to turn a cruise ship with a spoon. You can't do that. That's why it's so lovely to have even communities like this where you are running your own thing. So you can be nimble, you can be creative, and you can even model that to a point to other businesses that are bigger than yours, that are bigger, more, have been around for longer, or maybe stuck doing things in a certain way just because they've done them for so long. So there were a lot of things that kind of came into play. I'm glad that it's over. I'm so glad that it's over. But we leaned into it. For our pub crawl graphic, we made it a tugboat. We leaned into the ocean thing. Like, it was great.
You're like, really, this is a great story, and we're going to make it hilarious.
Let's make it fun. Like, if we have to talk about this, let's make it fun. Yeah, we had under the sea themes for, like, everything.
Under the sea. I love it. And one thing I want to point out, and then we'll move on, is what you're talking about influencing the publisher. So, like, you could be in a podcast network, right? Or you could have a deal with a big organization that you're working with, and you can still influence them, right? So making sure that you're willing to do that and willing to have those conversations, and being willing to be on a conference call with 30 employees from them and you and your one assistant, because that's your whole business, right? And say what you need to say and let them all hear it. So, make sure that you are an influence for how your stuff rolls out in the world, even when you're dealing with these large organizations, because you can have more impact than you think, right? I think you have more weight to throw around than you realize in those settings often. Okay, so tell us, where did the term the lazy genius stem from?
I wish I had a great story for that, but it's just my best friend came up with it. It's just the way it goes. She's an author as well. Her name's Emily P. Freeman. That's her author name. And she is just really good at naming things. And when I was creating this business, because this was my third internet business. My first one was I taught cooking classes and had like a food blog. And then my second one, I'd start a business with every child I have. It's weird. My second business was still on the internet, and it was called The Sugar Box. And I would make, because I'm a baker, and I would make pop culture themed desserts in so it was like, there's like a Harry Potter box, there's a Downton Abbey box, there's a Wizard of Oz box. And people would buy a box, and once a month they'd come to my house and they'd pick it up. And it was so fun, except for when I was like, hey, how much money am I making on this thing? Like, what do I want to do here? 2 cents an hour per box I sold.
Oh my God.
That would not get me into a Hello 7 mastermind, everyone. So I was like, maybe 2 cents a box, 2 cents an hour per box I sold. And I, at my highest capacity, I could do 85 boxes on my own. that's not a lot of money. So I just had to go, all right, what are we going to do? Are we going to try to scale this? Are we going to get like a building and a team and learn how to ship? But then it removes me from sort of the creativity. I just become like a fulfillment service, right? Or do I pivot and do something different? And I got pregnant, and so I was like, okay, we're going to pivot and do something different. And so I knew in those years of working on the internet, even though I was predominantly talking about food in all of those years, I noticed like just this low, like this really sad energy around so many people, women especially, who were just so tired. Everyone was so tired. And when I would have conversations with people in my real life and then people online, I noticed this pattern. People were tired about things they didn't care about. And I'm like, I don't understand this. This does not make sense.
Why do you let this thing you don't care about exhaust you?
I don't understand. And so I thought that, I had noticed that as I would speak to people online and I'd speak to people in my life, there were light bulbs would go off when I would share things. And I thought, maybe I have a good perspective on this. Maybe there is something about how I communicate that helps people feel like I can give them the permission to let this thing go. Like, who am I to say that? Somebody actually said that in a comment recently. Like, who are you to give permission? And I was like, well, 200,000 people seem to like it, so I don't know. I don't know what to say to you. But anyway, so I just noticed that pattern, and I wanted to contribute to its relief. And so that's when I started to think, I would just like to write about that. I don't really know what it would be. And I said to my friend Emily, and I was like, it's just kind of like I want people to sort of put their energy in things that they care about, but kind of let go of the things that they don't really care about. And she goes, lazy genius. And we both went, it was so exciting. We're like, that's it. So that's kind of how the name began. And then the business, I wrote online for probably maybe 9 months before I started the podcast.
Did you make any money writing online?
0%. 0%.
Which is less than 2 cents an hour.
It is. Less than a lateral move. It's not great. Well, I also, I think that one of the things that can be hard when you're starting a business, obviously, especially if you're starting one without capital, without credibility, without any of those things, that you have to earn the right to be heard, right? And so I had to spend time earning the right to be heard.
Such a good way to put it. Because I have to tell you, sometimes people ask me, well, I've tried everything and none of it's working. And I'm like, give me what's everything? And they name 3 things. And I'm like, honey, get out of my face with that. Okay? You're not entitled to people's attention. Okay? You have to earn it. And they have to say, why should I pay attention to you instead of this other thing that I already know I want to pay attention to? Right? Like, so you gotta, people's time is very valuable, and you have to care enough about what they care about to earn it. Right? So I love the way that you put that.
The pivot for me, the biggest investment is I took an online, kind of business training course. And actually it was finding that person. It was that avatar, is that customer avatar. I'm like, okay, who is this for? Who am I talking to? What do they need? And my first way I made money is I made a digital product. I just made an ebook, sold that puppy for like $10. I'm like, look at that. It's like Monopoly money. It just sort of like, just coming. This
disappears.
Is fun. So I started the podcast. I actually started my podcast with guests at first. I did 10 episodes with guests. And no lie, the reason I did that is because I didn't think I alone had anything worthwhile to say. And the only reason people would listen is if someone else was there. But as you know, the logistics of coordinating other humans to be on your show
that's a lot.
Is a whole thing.
Yes. Solo episodes are way easier. You just sit there and talk to yourself.
Yes. So I got to a point where I thought, well, logistically, it would be so much easier for me. This is kind of the lazy way to make this podcast, is if it's just
What's
me.
the lazy genius version of this podcast?
I know. But then I realized, like, no, you do have things to say, and you don't be afraid to say them. And so I started the podcast. I now have like 280 something episodes, so that's been a few years. But I didn't start monetizing the podcast until midway through, I guess it was this year, 2022, middle of last year maybe.
Yeah. So your only offer was the $10 ebook?
It was a $10 ebook. And then I wrote The Lazy Genius Way, so I got paid for that. And then it was like another ebook. And then, it just kind of, but now like we're pretty diversified. We've got podcast ads, we've got the books, we've got a lot of digital products that we make available.
Yeah.
So,
like
it
how
took time.
long? I just want to know, how long did you live off the $10 ebooks though?
Oh, like over a year.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. For
love
sure.
it.
But also, I think this is important too. Also, when I started my business, I did not necessarily have the goal that this is going to be the primary thing that's going to support my family. My husband had a job. He still has the same job, but he's a middle school counselor. I mean, there's not a lot of money in the school system. And so,
You're not shopping for private jet?
nope, we're not. I barely a
Not yet.
plane ticket, guys. We're not even getting no. So, but I think there was something, and actually reading your book was a huge shift for me in sort of thinking about, that idea of we are told to skimp and to go backwards instead of going forwards. And I was like, oh, that is so good. So that was also another, there were lots of those kinds of moments of just reminders of you can take up space.
Yes.
You can say your words. You can value the fact that people are going to listen to you, and you can be weirded out by it, as I am sometimes. I said to my husband last night, I'm like, why are people listening to me? I don't even understand. And also, I'm like, but nobody's saying a lot of these things, and maybe they're not saying them the way that I am. Maybe that permission-giving thing is just something that is uniquely attributed to my personality. I don't know. I'm just trying to be faithful to the work and be faithful to the person that I'm trying to serve. And it's grown. It has grown slowly. There has not been any viral anything, not any big spurts. It has just been, I'm just a tractor in a field of race cars. We're just like, we're still going. But we're going, like, the numbers steadily just keep going up.
Yes.
And I think the more that you consistently stay true to your voice and the person you're talking to, and you do it consistently, you're going to keep going.
That's literally all it takes.
It really does.
People are like, what's the secret? Just keep showing up and keep doing it every week, preferably twice a week.
And offer something of value.
Yes.
I think what you said about the entitlement.
Yes.
Like, you do not deserve anyone's attention. And it takes a lot of work to think, what does this person need to hear?
Yep.
What does this person need me to offer them? And the work to name that, and then to go, okay, what's the best package for that?
Yep.
Right? This is the offering. What's going to be the package? That's a lot of effort. And a lot of people quit. Before
Exactly.
they use that effort.
And it's also the stuff that's done in the dark that you don't get paid for.
No
You don't
money.
even get 2 cents an hour for that.
Nope.
You get
you
no
don't.
money. And then you have to go out there and do it consistently. And then, people do it for 6 weeks and they're like, well, it's not working. Yeah, not yet. Try 6 more months. Right. And see if you're willing to commit to it long term. It's just like any relationship. You have to commit long term.
Yes.
The longer you commit, the more people commit to you.
Yes.
And that's really how you grow an audience, unfortunately.
And I do think too, because we had talked a little bit before about, I think that there are some authors or aspiring authors in this room. And I think a great example of that is for a book proposal, is the work required
Yes.
to think, okay, where am I in the market? Who is this book for?
Yep.
I'm going to break the book and figure out an outline. I'm going to even send you sample chapters and all these things. And I have had so many people say to me, well, I just want to write a book. Well, if you can't do that, you don't deserve to write a book.
Right? Yeah.
You have to do this first. And if you can't do that work, there's no way you can write a book, because a book is even way harder than that.
It's
But
so much
this is
more work.
also this is also really hard. This is hard. And I do think that the internet work, because we see work that we believe in, and it appears to be effortless. And the amount of work required, the amount of effort required to make something look effortless is very, very high. And so just to honor the effort and be like, no, I'm the one who's going to put in this effort. A lot of these
That's
people
right.
are giving up, and I'm not going to.
Exactly.
I'm going to do this hard work.
Listen, yes, that deserves a clap for sure. I agree. It's just like, I know when people say, well, I don't know if I'll be successful. I know. You know how I know I'm going to be successful? Is because I'm just not going to quit until it happens. That's really all it is hanging in there and pushing through the hard parts, like when your books are at the bottom of the ocean, right? Or any number of challenges that you're going to have, or when you're making 2 cents and you do the math and you're like, well, I failed, right?
How are we going to pivot? Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And just continuing to just keep showing up and being consistent. Those are the people who are going to win. When it's hard, when you have razor thin margins or something goes wrong, or your launch fails and you pick yourself up and dust yourself off and do it again, fix whatever wasn't working and do it again. And because you're committed to your mission, because you're committed to your client and what you're trying to help them produce. And that's why I say, if you can do something that you really believe in, that matters to you, right? Like purpose or passion. I think the STEM word from passion means something that you're willing to die for. Right? And that's what it's about. It's about like having a mission that matters that much to you that you're willing to put effort in for and have some pain for, right? Like all the people that you see be successful, there were a lot of dark years, right? Before you saw them rise and have that success, right? And a lot of times we're literally on the way, we're on the cusp, and we give up. We're like, this feels hard, never mind. And it's like, okay, well, then you don't get the prize at the end, you know? Like you gotta push through those hard parts. And also what you were saying earlier about sometimes you just have an insight that other people don't have and you kind of take it for granted. And then you start repeating it to people and they're like, I was on the Drew Barrymore show talking about like, mothers not having to do everything for their children. Like, believe it or not, somebody else can do this laundry and you're not a bad mother. Somebody else can feed them. I'm going to sit down with them and talk to them while they eat, but I ain't cooking this food, right? Like, that's okay. And she was acting like, this is so revolutionary. I've never heard. And I was like, what? How is this revolutionary for you to just not do laundry? You're Drew Barrymore. Are you kidding me? Like, she literally forgot she was host for a moment. A lot of that got cut from that scene, but you could see a little bit of it where she was just like, okay, wait, tell me more about how I don't have to do laundry. She's like, never mind, whatever you're here for. Let's talk about that. Okay, so let's talk about the podcast. Just tell us a little bit. So you had 10 episodes with interviews, and you were like, that's whack. Let's make it easy. And so you started just talking to yourself with a microphone.
Started talking to myself. I did that first one. The first episode I did by myself was The Lazy Genius Shops at Aldi. That was the very first episode I did. So, So we have about 280 something episodes at this point, and they all, it's every week. I can't remember the last time we took off a week. It's been a while. But we do an episode every Monday. They're about 20 minutes or so, and they're just really specific. I think one of the things that mattered to me, and it's different for everybody. That's why knowing what matters to you matters, right? And one of the things that mattered to me for my own listeners is when I would listen to a podcast and an episode title was not very descriptive or kind of tricky. Like you had to like break the code to figure out like, this is a joke, but what are you talking about? I don't know what you're actually talking about. So I decided we are going to make these titles like as clear as possible, right? And I don't want them to be so long that a mom has to, because I do have a lot, like my audience is mostly women, and there are a lot of moms, but half of them are working moms. So it's it's kind of a variation. But I wanted something that was short enough that you didn't have to fit in or you had to quit in the middle. I just wanted it to be easy for people. So that's kind of been my thing is we just pay attention to the seasons, we pay attention to where we are, and you are not going to be tricked by my episode titles. And I really enjoy it. And one of the reasons why the podcast is an important part of the business is because it's the most scalable thing. It can grow, and I don't have to change a bit of what I do. Like a bit. One thing. Because the growth, the way that it would grow in revenue is more listeners. Guess how you get more listeners? You make a good podcast.
Yep.
So that's what I focus on, as opposed to how can I get more people to do this thing, or I need to make this other product. I need to make another $10 ebook or whatever. It's like, no, just keep making the podcast good.
Yes.
Just keep doing that. So it's a really valuable piece of our revenue stream because it's the most scalable.
Yes. And it's a one-to-many offer, right? You've figured out how to monetize it. And then that's your key KPI. Like if I just keep getting more podcast listeners, everything else will do what it needs to do.
Everything else grows. When the podcast grows, everything else grows.
Yes. And so that's why it's so important to understand like what makes my business work? What is the business model here? And what is the thing that drives more revenue or that drives more of whatever it is that we want? And then you could just focus on that. That's like the top of your flywheel, right? And then as long as you're doing that and fueling that, the rest of it does what it's supposed to do. And you don't actually have to work that hard on some of the other bits.
No. Which that's kind of ideal.
Because you want to be a lazy genius.
I do. Somebody recently asked me, what are you going to do next? Like, what's your, the phrase was, what's your next frontier? And I was like, I don't want a frontier. I want to take another day off a week. Like, I've gotten it down to one. I work 4 days a week. I love to work 3 days a week.
Yes.
Maybe even 2. Like to sit on my couch and read with that cocktail we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
That is, I don't want frontiers. I want that.
Yes.
I want to be on my couch with a book and a drink. So like whatever I can do to get there is fantastic. You can make more money without doing more work.
Yes, you
If
can.
you build your machine the right way.
Correct.
You
I
can.
mean, we are just so aligned. Isn't it hilarious that we both live in the same place?
Our kids were on the same soccer team, you guys, and we did not know until the last day of the season. Didn't even know.
Because you know why? Pro mothers. That's right. Because we did not go to practice. We sent our
Never.
husbands. Okay? They took the kids to practice. We sat our asses home, and then we saw each other at the last game, I think, in the parking lot. We were like, wait a minute. Those were your kids this whole time? Her son is on my daughter's team. It's hilarious all season, and we didn't see each other. I'm proud of us for that.
I know. Same.
I'm
Same
proud
thing.
of us.
Same. Same.
We live these values, okay? We don't just talk about it. We be about it. Okay, so tell us some more names of episodes of your podcast.
Oh, gosh.
What have been your most successful ones, and did it surprise you?
So one of the highest category is always time management, always. And I think I actually have a really unique way of seeing time, because I think that there is great value in seeing time as something that is not just about production. Mm-hmm. And that's how a lot of time management resources are structured. It's about how much can you get done. And like I just said, I'm like, how can I do less?
Yes.
But still do the things that matter. So we do a time management episode at least once a month, just because of that, because it really meets the need. I will say that whenever I talk about bodies, that is always a really high download number, and I think it's because people, especially women, are just seeking a lot of freedom to exist in their own bodies. So I speak about that a lot. I'm not an expert at that. I'm just like, no one seems to be listening to this, that you are good, that your body is good. Like, no matter what, your body is good. Why are we still doubting this? And so that's one of the more surprising topics. So I'll keep speaking about that until we have more confident people. We'll keep talking about that too. But I literally talk about anything. You can lazy genius anything, which in some ways is great, because I'm like, what should we talk about now? And then other ways I'm like, we can talk about anything. Limits are really helpful. So we've had to kind of build some of those in, or else we'll just kind of float. And we don't want to float.
Well, what I hear you saying, which is so crucial to success, is that you really dig into the data and you see what are people responding to, and then you give them more of what they're responding to. Oh my gosh. What a unique way to run a business.
And I will say to the data averse in the room, I am somebody who, I make decisions based on my gut, like almost exclusively. My gut has not failed me very many times in business. But my gut is more confident when it's affirmed by data. Mm-hmm. Or if I can have the data come in and then I can go, what is your gut reaction to how we should respond to this data, right? So just for those of you who are like, data, like I kind of am sometimes, that it can work in tandem with how you actually do naturally want to make decisions about whether it's how you feel about it, what your instinct says. The data can inform that. You don't have to be like stuck following exactly what it says, because sometimes, data matters. Yes. It absolutely matters. And sometimes that's part of being nimble and creative in our own business, is sometimes the data is like, this is what the data says, but I really do want to try this thing.
Yes, exactly. And you're just like, but I don't like it. Yeah. So I ain't doing that.
Exactly.
But that's exactly how I do it too. I use, like, my gut is one source of data, right? Like I call it my body compass, right? So I use that, and it's one source of data. And then I use reports, that's another source of data, right? We can use both. We don't have to use just one. And sometimes it helps because it validates your body compass, and sometimes it doesn't. And you have to say, do I want to bet on myself in this way? And am I okay if I fail? Right? If I wind up being wrong, because the data tells me, listen, if I listened to data, I would not be here, okay? The data says, broke black child, do not start a business. Do not do anything you're trying to do. Go sit down somewhere, right? That's what the data says. So you can't always follow it, but it is valuable, especially when it comes to digging in and obsessing over your ideal clients, which it sounds like, to me, that's what I'm taking away is your key to success is you obsess over how you're going to help your people.
That was the turning point, I think, of my whole business, is when I named her. And she was pretend at first. Her name was Melissa, and I wrote down like literally everything about her, like what magazine she read, all the things. And then I met someone in real life, and I'm like, you're Melissa. This is amazing. So I will actually call her. Like when I'm writing a book, when I wrote The Lazy Genius Kitchen, I called her, and I was like, listen, this is what I want to do. What do you think about this? Does this meet you where you are? So I can actually go to that person. And I think that's tremendously valuable. Like, you might not have the person in your real life right now, but once you name that person, keep an eye out for an actual human avatar for that. And talk to them. Ask them how you're serving them well and how you're not, so that you can do it better.
It's so true. We have new to business Nicole. So that's our
I love that.
new to business
New to
Nicole
business
is
Nicole.
our ideal client in terms of starting at the beginning and working with us through over time, right? Okay, so tell me what I think a lot of people in this room want to know is how do you write a New York Times bestseller? How do you hit a bestseller list? Is there a formula?
Nope. There is not. Next question. No, I'm kidding. So, okay. Bestseller lists are a mystery, and they're all based on different things. The problem is, the one that everyone wants the most, quote unquote, is the New York Times. And it is the most arbitrary of all the lists.
Yes.
So you're putting your faith in the the least dependable of all the boats. And that can be really hard because you know in your head, this is so arbitrary. This is not based on the best book or the most sales or any of that. Like, this is an editorial decision. And they're allowed to do that. Like, they're allowed to do that. There's nothing wrong with it. But it is such an interesting paradox that there is so much effort and energy and sadness that goes into trying to make this list that you literally cannot make. You can do all the right things and not make it. You can do none of the right things and make it.
Exactly. It's editorial.
It's real frustrating.
Right. So it's like, basically that means that there's editors making a decision based on what they want to do, right? So you could have sold more than lots of other books because it's all about like the first week, your launch week. So if you have enough pre-launch numbers plus your launch week, it can get, they say like, I don't know, there's all kinds of articles that try to create a formula for it.
There are certain things that they do say you need to do at least this to be in the conversation. So you need to sell at least 10,000 copies, but there are tons of books on there that do not sell that many copies.
Yeah,
But you need to sell at least 10,000 copies across all the formats, and it's not just from one retailer, it's a variety of retailers,
Yes.
there's independent bookstores and like all the things. You have to have some sort of national media. You have to come from one of like the main publishers. You can't come from like a boutique publisher, and that's just to get into the room. Now, there are plenty of people who've been on the list who don't have those things, and they are on it. So it's sort of hard, but I recognize the privilege that I have to be like, I know, like the New York Times, like it doesn't matter. And I made it. Like I see that.
Yes.
I see that. And because I can say, I know, but it doesn't really matter. But I made it. So it's not fair for me to be like, yeah, it doesn't really matter when I did. And I received the, quote unquote credibility that comes from that, when really there's not a lot. But I did get on my Instagram bio real fast when Kitchen hit it, and I was like, 2x NYT. Like, there is something really exciting about it, and I feel that tension in myself of how to value that in the proper context, right? To value that it is really exciting, but to dismiss it as like, well, you just don't know. When I did make it, it's weird. It's a weird thing. Yeah. It's hard to have conversations with my peers who have written books. Like it's a really hard thing because it's that box you really, really want to check, and you have so little control in who's even holding the pen. It's like, I just don't even know how to make this happen. So there is no formula. But I do think that the goal, and your book does this, the goal of writing a book to me is I want to write something that serves people, that they return to again and again, and it has a long tail.
Yes.
I would rather keep selling. Like the book is still selling.
Yep.
Both of them are. And then be a flash in the pan and work so hard to make a list and then maybe do it or maybe not, and then crap out and do something else.
Yes, and here's the thing. Everyone is going to say to you as a new author, don't focus on the bestseller list. Just focus on reaching your readers. And a lot of ambitious people are going to ignore that completely and be like, no, we're going to do it. We're going to pre-launch. We're going to hit these numbers, right? And you'll hit the numbers, and then you still might not get on the list, like what I experienced, right? We sold a ton of books, and that's not sometimes.
You had national press. Like, you had all the things.
I checked all the boxes.
You checked all the boxes. I remember checking the list that week, and I was so mad. I was like, where is Rachel? I was so mad.
But it's true. So, like, you're never going to understand it until after it passes. And it's always going to be, it hurts, right? Like, because especially if you put a lot of stock in it. But then when you get to the other side, you realize your agent and everybody that you talked to about it was totally right, that it's so much more exciting to actually have readers be moved by it. And have them changing their lives, where people are like negotiating higher salaries, and they DM me and tell me about how much more money they made, right? And they're probably telling you about how much more time they have back and how much they are so much happier with their lives, right? And so, like, that is so much more rewarding than any accolade that you're going to get anyway. And the book can give you so much credibility, even if whether you have that bestseller status or not, it doesn't matter. As long as the people who are supposed to get it, you know, like, are reached by it, and it can do so much for your business as well.
And I will say this, and I think this is relevant not just to this conversation, like the goal of something above serving our customer or reader or whoever, that's going to get you in trouble.
Yep.
And your customer's going to feel it. You know, I think if I were like super focused, especially with this first book, if I were super focused on, I want to make a list, everybody help me buy the book so that I can maybe make a list. That's about me. That's not about them. Mm-hmm. And people feel that. I think they really do feel that. And they trust you for longer when you continue to honor them.
Yes.
As opposed to putting your own goals above their well-being.
Yes. And I think you can have your goals you can have big, ambitious goals, and it can be aligned with serving your customer.
Absolutely.
As well, you know, but don't put it above. Like, have them both be part of how you win, right? So I just want to open it up if there's one or two questions that we can take, and then we'll wrap up. Does anybody have a question? I know I'm supposed to be ending, and I'm ignoring it.
I wonder what all the hand gestures were for.
Anybody have a question for Kendra that they want to ask? Yes. Can we get her a mic? Or you could give her mine if you want. And I'll repeat it.
I love it.
Hi there. I just have a quick question. I was wondering, did you always know that you were going to be a writer or an author? Or did that, like, what changed for you that made you feel like a book is in my stars?
That is such a good question, because no, I never thought that. That was never a dream of mine. And I feel weird saying that because of how many people I know who that is their dream. But it was the next step in the business. Now, I went to school. I have a degree in English, and so I loved writing, and I love storytelling, and I love words. Like, I think that was always something that was important to me. But a book was never part of the plan. But what happened is I was making these podcast episodes and getting DMs and all the things. The patterns were so clear to me of what people were asking for, and also I wanted to be able to give them a resource, as opposed to like, well, go listen to these 7 podcast episodes. There wasn't a path, right? There were just like little drops in the bucket, little one-off things that they could do. And I realized, I think it's time. And I'm going to be honest, I was resistant to write a book because I didn't want to. It's hard. It was harder than I thought. And I already thought it was going to be really hard. But the work required, it's like we were saying before, it's like, okay, am I gonna do this work? Am I gonna be the one? Because a lot of people are like, no, I'm not gonna do this. Or they write a mediocre book, because the work required to write a great book is a lot more than to write a mediocre one. And so I was just like, okay, I'm willing to do this. Let's do it. Let's jump in, and wrote the proposal and, sign a contract and all the things. So no, which I think in some ways can be really freeing, that you don't actually have to have this like lifelong dream. You hear that from a lot of people. Like, it's always been my dream to write a book. And I really would feel badly when I was like, that's not my dream. So it can work both ways. It can be your dream and you can follow it, and it cannot, and it just be another part of your business, and you do it anyway.
Awesome. Any other questions from the crew? Well, thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. I feel like I learned stuff. So
That's saying something. Yeah. I'm glad.
I love it. I love it. So good and so insightful. Everybody go out and get The Lazy Genius Way. And there's another book, The Lazy Genius Kitchen. And this one, tell me about The Lazy Genius Kitchen. Tell folks what it's about.
Yes. Okay, so the Lazy Genius Way, it's 13 principles that you can apply in, by itself or in tandem with others to basically lazy genius any problem, to be a genius about the things that matter and lazy about the things that don't. Because I think that a lot of sort of self-help books, what the author does is shares their experience of this is what worked for me.
Right.
Well, I am not you. So I need something different. And I wanted to write a book that would work for any personality, any season of life, that you can go back to this toolkit that these principles can give you. And then the Lazy Genius Kitchen is applying these 13 principles to our most used, except at Rachel's house, our most used room because we all have to eat, though. And guess what? You have chosen how to feed your family.
Yes. Intentionally.
Intentionally.
Right?
You have
my values.
Yes, exactly. And there's a 5-step process that is in the Lazy Genius Kitchen that you can actually apply to anything. That is prioritize, name what matters, time with your family, not time in the kitchen. Essentialize is number 2. Get rid of what's in the way and make sure you have what you need. Get rid of the guilt that I'm not the one who's cooking.
Yep.
Right? Organize. Put things in their place. Hire someone to cook the food for me. That is in its place now, right? It's organized. Boom. Personalize. You want to feel like yourself in that process. And then 5 is systemize. You want to keep it in a flow.
Yes.
And you can apply those 5 steps to anything, but I apply those 5 steps to 6 areas in your kitchen so that you can not hate that room that you actually really want to love. It's illustrated. It's like so pretty.
It's beautiful.
It's so
It's beautiful.
It's
and
really
you know
pretty.
what? And there's some on the bottom of the Atlantic.
There's 10,000 copies on the bottom of some ocean, just hanging out. I had one of my buddies. The day we got the news, she said, "Well, Ariel's maybe fixing her little kitchen, or, her little area with all her stuff." And then she goes, "Oh wait, is that too soon?" And I was like, "Yes, it happened today." Make that joke 3 days from now, please.
Exactly. And I mean, I think that cooking and eating is one of those things that I have to constantly talk about with my clients, even though I'm talking to business women, right? Because it takes up, when you do the measurement, it takes up 20 hours of your week. So if you can sort that out and organize that and minimize the time on that, you get so much time back that then you can put into your business or your family or whatever else. So both of them totally worth reading, as you can see from this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kendra, for being here.
Thank
and
you
thank
for
you to
having
our
me.
lovely
This is great.
audience. Thank you so much for joining us for the Hello 7 podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our channel, comment below, and share this episode with your friends.